Under the mask of friendship, the village of Elkwood seemed like a place where time had stopped. Cozy, ivy-covered houses, narrow streets where the sound of children's bicycle bells echoed in the evenings, and the local market, which became the epicenter of all news and events every Saturday. At the heart of it all, the lives of Adam and Kate thrived, a couple who were seen by everyone as the embodiment of harmony. Adam, a tall and strong man with a kind face, worked at the local auto repair shop. His hands were always slightly stained with grease, but it only added to his charm. He was the kind of man people turned to not only for car repairs, but also for advice or a friendly conversation. Kate, on the other hand, was a graceful woman. She spent most of her time in a small antique shop she inherited from her grandmother. Her favorite clients were elderly women who came not so much to shop, but for a cup of tea and a warm chat. Kate had an innate charm that made people feel comfortable in her presence. In Elkwood, people would say about this couple, "If love exists anywhere, it lives in Adam and Kate's home." Their house, surrounded by blooming roses, became a symbol of a happy marriage. In the evenings, they could be seen on the porch, Kate with a book in her hands and Adam with a cup of tea. Their laughter could be heard far beyond their yard, echoing through the streets of the village. However, behind this perfect image, there was something no one could see. One morning, when the sun was just beginning to chase away the morning mist, Kate entered the kitchen. Her light dress swayed gently with her movements, and her blonde hair, still slightly disheveled from sleep, fell softly on her shoulders. Adam sat at the table, gazing at an old photograph. His face wore an unusual expression, somewhere between contemplation and sadness. "What are you looking at?" she asked, trying to peer over his shoulder. Adam flipped the photo and placed it face down on the table. "Nothing, just memories," he replied briefly, forcing a smile. Kate paused for a moment, then gently touched his shoulder. "You know what I think?" she asked. "Today will be a great day. We could go to the lake, have a picnic. What do you say?" Adam lifted his eyes, and his smile became a little more natural. "As you say, darling." The day really was perfect. Elkwood Lake sparkled in the sunlight like a giant mirror. Adam built a small fire by the shore, while Kate arranged the food on a blanket. They laughed, reminisced about stories from their life, and it seemed that all the little discomforts that had appeared between them recently simply dissolved in the warm summer air. However, as they were heading home, Adam felt that something had changed. He noticed Kate checking her phone, and a look of anxiety crossed her face. "Is something wrong?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "No," she replied, but her voice sounded distant. "Just a message from a client. Nothing important." Adam didn't press her further, but the feeling of unease stayed with him. The next few weeks returned to their usual rhythm. Adam worked at the shop, and Kate continued with her antique store. However, small details started to accumulate, like a snowball gathering speed. Kate often stayed late at work, explaining it by the influx of clients. Her phone was always on silent, and she began avoiding spending evenings with Adam. One evening, Adam decided not to go home immediately after work. He stopped by the antique shop, hoping to catch a glimpse of Kate through the window. Inside, it was dark, but just as he was about to leave, he noticed Kate's silhouette. She was standing by the counter, apparently talking to someone. Her face was tense, and her hands nervously twisted the ring on her finger. The man standing next to her leaned in closer, and Adam saw Kate subtly step back. He couldn't make out his face, but that seemed irrelevant. Something in that moment made Adam's heart tighten. He didn't enter the shop. Instead, he returned to his car and sat there, staring out the window until he saw Kate finally leave and walk briskly toward home. That night, they had their first argument. "Are you saying I'm hiding something?" Kate exclaimed when Adam tried to bring up her late nights at work. "I'm not saying that, Kate. I just want to know what's going on. We've always told each other the truth, haven't we?" "You're controlling me," she shouted. "I'm working, Adam, and that's it. Why is it suddenly a problem?" He didn't respond. They simply stared at each other for a few seconds, then Kate left the room, leaving him alone. Adam sat there for a long time, contemplating. Something was changing between them, and he could feel it. But what exactly? And, most importantly, why? He wanted to believe it was just a temporary rough patch that could be overcome. But deep down, he knew this story was only just beginning. A few years ago, long before their move to Elkwood, Adam and Kate were two complete strangers whose paths were never meant to cross. But fate, it seemed, always had other plans. Their story began in a small bookstore hidden in a quiet side street of a big city. Adam, as usual, was in a hurry. At that time, his life was a vague mixture of work, friends, and short-lived relationships that didn't leave any lasting impressions. That day, he was looking for a birthday gift for his sister. She was a book lover, and finding something special for her was always a real challenge. The bookstore he entered felt like a place from a fairy tale. Dark wooden shelves stretched almost to the ceiling, filled with books of all sizes and colors. It smelled of pollen, coffee, and old paper. Adam felt slightly out of place, like a stranger in a world that wasn't his own. He made his way between the rows, examining the covers. A volume with a gold-embossed cover caught his attention. It was at the top of a pile that was barely staying upright on a narrow shelf. "Careful," someone called from behind, but it was already too late. Adam had carelessly pulled the book, and the entire pile wobbled. Before he could do anything, the books began to fall. One of them hit him square on the head. "Ouch!" Adam exclaimed, rubbing the spot where he was hit. A hand appeared in front of him, offering the very book he had dropped. "Looks like you lost the battle with literature," the girl said, her voice tinged with barely contained laughter. Adam looked up and saw Kate. Her blonde hair was tied in a messy bun, and her green eyes were laughing at what had just happened. She was holding the book, clearly waiting for him to take it. "Well, at least literature is stronger than I am," Adam replied, taking the book. "Thanks. They're more dangerous than they seem." Kate smiled and started picking up the books that had fallen on the floor. "Let me help," Adam offered, feeling guilty. They began putting the books back on the shelf together, and Adam noticed that Kate moved confidently, as if she knew every shelf by heart. "Do you work here?" he asked, hoping to start a conversation. "No," Kate replied, standing up straight. "I just really love this place. It's always so peaceful here, and books say more than people do." Her answer intrigued him. "You seem like someone who's read more books than I ever will in my life," he joked. Kate laughed. Her laugh was warm and a little shy. "Well, if you're new here, maybe I can help. What are you looking for?" "A gift for my sister. She loves books, but I don't really know much about them." Kate tilted her head, looked at him thoughtfully, and suddenly asked, "Does she like adventures or more romance?" "Probably adventures, but with something unusual. She's always drawn to stories that change the way you see the world." Kate smiled and gestured for him to follow her. She led him to another row, pulled out a slim book with an illustrated cover, and handed it to Adam. "Try this. It's a story about a girl searching for hidden treasures in a world full of dangers at every turn. Very unusual plot, with a touching ending." Adam took the book, examining it closely. "It looks interesting. I hope you're right. If not, my sister will think I'm hopeless." "If she doesn't like it," Kate smiled, "come back, and I'll find something else." Adam chuckled slightly, and suddenly realized that he didn't want to leave. "Do you come here often?" "Quite often. This place is my little escape from the world." "Sounds like you're looking for adventures too, but the quiet kind," Adam suggested. Kate looked at him, surprised, and nodded. "I guess you're right." She was about to leave when Adam gathered his courage. "Would it be okay to invite you for coffee? I appreciate your help, but it seems like I'd like to hear more about your quiet adventures." Kate stopped, slightly taken aback, but her eyes shone with curiosity. "You don't seem like the usual customer," she said. "All right, but with one condition. You'll also tell me your story." "Deal," Adam replied, unable to hide his excitement. They went to a small cafe a few blocks away from the bookstore. Kate ordered green tea, and Adam ordered a regular black coffee. Their conversation flowed easily, as if they had known each other for years. Adam told her how he worked in an auto repair shop and his love for old cars. Kate shared that her grandmother once owned an antique shop and how she dreamed of restoring the business. The conversation stretched on. They laughed, shared their little quirks, and didn't notice how it started to get dark outside. When they finally parted ways, Adam felt that this meeting was something more than just a coincidence. Kate gave him her phone number, joking, "If your sister decides the gift is awful, just reach out." Adam saved her number in his phone under the name Kate, the book savior. This meeting at the bookstore marked the beginning of their story. Though they didn't know it yet, it was the spark that later grew into what everyone around them saw as the perfect union. But even then, amidst the laughter and jokes, there remained a space in their hearts for secrets that would later surface. Josh and Rachel, though they appear to be the perfect couple, were like day and night. Josh, always loud and confident, loved being the center of attention. He never missed an opportunity to boast about his latest successful sale or new purchase. Rachel, on the other hand, was quiet, calm, and had a balanced outlook on life. She loved peace, nature, and working on her small flower farm. Their meeting had been by chance. Josh was selling a house in a nearby town, and Rachel happened to visit as a potential buyer. She was looking for a quiet place for her new passion, growing flowers. Josh charmed her with his enthusiasm, but it was her modesty and sincerity that made him insist on showing her the best option. The house was modest, but perfect for her plans. And although it seemed like they would never find common ground, something in that meeting sparked a connection between them. Later, after settling in Elkwood, Rachel became a local celebrity. Her flowers were known not only in the village, but also beyond. She found meaning and love in every plant, which she conveyed to people through her arrangements. Josh proudly told everyone that it was he who helped Rachel find her home. However, even in their perfect life, there were shadows. Josh, driven by the desire for fame and success, often neglected Rachel's needs. He might forget her birthday or an important event, getting caught up in work or meetings with friends. Rachel silently accepted this, but each instance left an invisible scar on her soul. One summer evening, Josh decided to throw a party at his house, inviting Adam and Kate. He loudly declared that he wanted to throw an evening that the village would be talking about for months. "Rachel, bring more flowers for the table. Let's make everything look beautiful," Josh called out while she was working in the garden. "Sure, Josh," she quietly replied, sighing. Rachel enjoyed evenings with friends, but every such gathering took a huge effort from her. She knew that Josh would spend the entire evening showing off and entertaining the guests, while she would remain in the background. It didn't annoy her, but she always felt like an outsider in such situations. When Adam and Kate arrived, the evening started with light jokes and delicious food. Josh was in his element, telling stories that made everyone laugh and offering toasts. Adam and Josh quickly bonded, discussing old cars, which they both shared a passion for. Kate actively joined the conversation, but Rachel stayed apart, watching everyone from her favorite bench in the garden. "Rachel, you're so quiet, as always," Kate said, sitting next to her. "I like to listen," Rachel smiled. Kate looked at her for a moment, then nodded. Her gaze was sharp, but Rachel decided not to dwell on it. That evening, something unusual happened. Josh, trying to impress, started joking around with Adam, saying that he was always clinging to his old cars. Although at first, it was taken as a joke, Josh's words gradually became harsher. "Well, you do realize, Adam, that with those cars you'll always be stuck in the past. Everyone is living for the future now. Look at me. I invest, I earn, I move forward. And you?" His voice sounded too loud, and his smile grew predatory. Adam calmly replied that he liked his life, but the tension was already in the air. Rachel saw this and felt herself growing uncomfortable. "Josh, enough," she said quietly, but her words went unnoticed. The party ended, but Rachel couldn't fall asleep for a long time. She felt that something in her life needed to change. Josh was becoming more and more obsessed with his success and prestige, while her feelings and desires remained secondary to him. The next morning, she woke up early and went to the garden. The dew shimmered on the petals, and the silence was a luxury she cherished most. Her flowers were a comfort to her, but even they couldn't ease her anxiety. Later that same day, she ran into Kate at the local store. Kate was as friendly as always, but there was something in her gaze that Rachel couldn't quite understand. "How are you?" Kate asked, almost casually. "Good," Rachel answered shortly, but Kate kept looking at her. Their brief conversation left Rachel with the feeling that Kate knew something she hadn't said. These events were just the beginning of changes. The tension in Josh and Rachel's life was building up, something that could no longer be ignored. Josh only saw success and achievement in his path, while Rachel longed for warmth and understanding, which she was finding less and less in her marriage. Kate began to change. Her behavior became different. It was as if she was both present with Adam and somewhere far away. At first, it was small things. She might forget something she had said just a few minutes ago, or suddenly change the subject of the conversation. Adam tried to convince himself that it was due to tiredness or problems at work. But soon, these small things started turning into something bigger. One evening, when Adam came home early, Kate was sitting in the kitchen, holding a cup of tea. Her phone was lying nearby, and a notification was flashing on the screen. Adam stopped in the doorway, noticing how quickly she grabbed her phone, as if afraid he might see something. Her face remained calm, but her eyes couldn't hide the anxiety. "Who's that?" Adam asked, trying to keep his voice normal. "Just Rachel. We were talking about some flower arrangements for the store," Kate replied, looking away. Adam nodded, but doubt settled in his mind. He loved Kate and trusted her, but this conversation triggered a strange feeling of discomfort. A few days later, when they were having dinner with Josh and Rachel, Adam started to notice something else. Kate seemed a little tense. She avoided making direct eye contact with Josh, but sometimes her eyes lingered on him a little longer than necessary. Josh, for his part, acted naturally, but Adam felt like he was hiding something too. "Kate, you're being strangely quiet today," Josh said with a smile. "What's going on?" "Nothing, just a long day," she replied without looking up. Rachel didn't pay attention, continuing to talk about the new flower varieties she had started growing. Adam also said nothing but felt the tension between them growing. One day, during another gathering, Adam suggested that the group go on a nature trip. Josh agreed enthusiastically, but Kate said she had to work. Rachel also decided to stay home due to a flower order. So, Adam and Josh went together. On the way, Adam couldn't hold back any longer. "Josh, I have to ask you directly. Have you noticed anything strange about Kate lately?" "What do you mean?" Josh asked, leaning toward the steering wheel. "She's become distant, like she's hiding something." Adam paused, then continued, "Is it somehow connected to you?" Josh burst out laughing, as if he had heard something absurd. "Me? Of course not. Kate is a great woman, but why do you suddenly think there's something between us?" Adam remained silent, trying to figure out if Josh's laughter was genuine. After returning home, the situation only worsened. Kate began avoiding long conversations with Adam, often finding reasons to leave the room. Her phone was always in her hands, and she only took calls in private. One evening, Adam decided to check her phone while she was sleeping. He didn't find anything suspicious, but doubts still lingered in his mind. Had she deleted everything? Was she being more careful than he thought? The next day, they all met to watch an old movie. Kate and Josh sat next to each other, and although they didn't touch, there seemed to be an invisible thread between them. Adam noticed this and couldn't shake the feeling that something was going on that he couldn't quite understand. When the evening ended, Adam approached Rachel while the others were gathering their things. "Did you notice anything?" he asked. "What do you mean?" she asked, surprised. "About Kate and Josh." Rachel looked at him and seemed to think for a moment. "I don't know, Adam. I think you're overthinking it. But," she paused, "sometimes I do get a strange feeling that they understand each other too well." Adam remained silent, feeling the anxiety growing inside him. The feeling that something was hidden beneath the surface was becoming stronger. But he had no proof, only his suspicions and feelings. Adam couldn't stand the uncertainty any longer. Every gesture, every glance between Kate and Josh seemed full of hidden meaning. He decided to act, not just sit back and watch, but to find real answers. One thought wouldn't let him rest. If something was really going on between Kate and Josh, he needed to find out before it went too far. The next day, he pretended to go to work but stayed in the car around the corner. He was sure Kate would notice as soon as he left if she was hiding something. Time passed slowly, but about an hour later, the door to their house opened, and Kate quickly slipped outside. She didn't look like she was rushing to work. Dressed casually, with a light backpack on her shoulders, she looked around as if making sure no one saw her, then headed toward the subway station. Adam immediately followed her, keeping a safe distance. Kate entered a cafe on a quiet street and sat at a corner table. A few minutes later, Josh joined her. They didn't hug or kiss, but their conversation seemed filled with some hidden energy. Kate said something, and Josh leaned in closer, smiling in a way Adam had never seen before. Adam felt his anger boiling up, but he decided not to make a scene. He needed evidence. He began taking photos of them with his phone through the glass while they continued talking. Then Kate pulled something out of her backpack. It looked like a note or a small notebook. She handed it to Josh, and he quickly tucked it into his jacket pocket. Adam waited for them to leave. They exited the cafe together but went in opposite directions. Josh headed to his office, and Kate made her way to her antique shop, which she was so proud of and where she spent most of her time. Adam decided to follow Josh to see what he would do with the note. Josh entered his office, and Adam decided it was time to act. He called Rachel and told her he wanted to talk. They met in the nearest park, where Adam showed her the photos and shared his suspicions. "Does this mean anything?" he asked, watching Rachel's reaction. Rachel stared at the photos for a long time, then sighed. "I don't know what to think. Kate has never said anything, but this is really strange. Especially that note. Could it have something to do with her shop?" "Her shop?" Adam was surprised. "Yes, she's always talking about wanting to update it or add something unusual to attract more customers. Maybe Josh is helping her in some way. But why is it so secretive?" Adam decided to proceed with caution. He couldn't accuse Kate or Josh without real evidence, but he couldn't ignore it any longer. That evening, he returned home and acted as if nothing had happened. Kate also seemed calm, though there was a shadow of tension in her eyes. Adam knew this waiting game would end sooner or later. The next day, he went to Kate's shop to talk to her. He noticed how quickly she cleared some papers from the desk when he entered. "Hey, what are you doing here?" she asked, pretending to be cheerful. "Just wanted to make sure everything's all right," he replied, carefully watching her reaction. Kate smiled, but the smile was strained. "Everything's fine, just a lot of work." Adam noticed another note on the desk. He couldn't make out what was written on it, but his anxiety only grew. Returning home, he decided to do a little investigation. That evening, when Kate was asleep, he carefully took her backpack. Inside were ordinary items, but in one of the pockets, he found a small notebook. He opened it and saw strange entries, some codes and drawings that he couldn't understand. Adam didn't know what it meant, but he was certain that Kate and Josh were hiding something more than just friendship. His heart raced as he thought about what it could be. A conspiracy? A shared secret? Or something much more serious? He decided to leave the notebook where it was and pretend nothing had happened. But his decision was final. He had to get to the truth, no matter what it was. Adam told Kate he needed to go visit his mother and that he wouldn't be home all night. However, he actually stayed behind. He decided to keep an eye on Kate, though he couldn't explain why he felt such unease. Something in her behavior lately was troubling him, and he couldn't shake the feeling. He stood around the corner of the house, waiting, watching the dark windows, which showed no sign of activity inside. Kate was home, and this surprised him. She hadn't left, as he'd first thought. Adam didn't know why, but his heart started racing when he saw another figure appear at the doorstep. It was a man, but not the one he expected to see. He was nothing like Josh. Tall, with dark hair, dressed in a suit that clearly didn't fit the time of day. And what struck Adam most was that the man wore dark sunglasses, even though the sun had long since set. Even stranger was the way the man moved, as if trying to remain unnoticed, as if he didn't want to draw attention. Adam couldn't figure out what was wrong, but he felt that this man had something to do with Kate. Adam watched as the man walked toward the door. At that moment, he was already ready to break his silence and observe the situation from a closer distance. He quietly approached the window that faced Kate's hall and watched as she opened the door and let him inside. An unsettling feeling wouldn't leave Adam. He couldn't take his eyes off the man, as an inexplicable fear began to grow in his heart. And it wasn't just a regular fear, it was the anxiety of what he might see, of not knowing how this would end. A few minutes later, he saw how the man and Kate disappeared from sight, most likely moving to one of the rooms. At that point, Adam made the decision to stay and keep watching. He had no right to enter the house, but he also could no longer afford to be blind to what was happening. Adam decided to follow them, quietly moving step by step around the corner of the house. Yet, he didn't dare to get any closer, even though he desperately wanted to. And then, at that moment, after a few minutes that felt like hours, he saw them get close to one of the rooms and begin to kiss. It wasn't just a brief kiss. It was an emotional and passionate scene, and Adam felt his heart breaking. He couldn't understand why Kate did this, why she was with that man. He felt a betrayal he couldn't explain. Adam left his observation spot and quietly left the house, not wanting to be seen. He walked through the empty streets, his head down. Everything in his life was falling apart like a house of cards. What was he supposed to do now? Should he have known earlier? In the early morning, when Adam returned home, he was completely exhausted. All his plans, all his hopes, everything had collapsed. He lay on the floor, unable to even get into bed. His body was drained from the emotions, and his mind couldn't accept everything he had seen. Thus began his new day, but in his heart, only the pain from what had happened remained, and the uncertainty of what awaited him next. Kate acted as if nothing had happened. She was so cold and calm that Adam couldn't tell if she truly hadn't noticed anything, or was just too skilled in her lies. She showed no signs that she had been hiding any secrets. She smiled, made breakfast as usual, and even calmly talked to him, as if nothing had occurred. Adam decided not to show his emotions, even though his heart was breaking. He said nothing. He observed and waited, silently trying to understand why things were the way they were. But he had no answer. That day, Kate, as if nothing had happened, said she was going to meet her mother. And even though Adam no longer believed her words, he decided that he couldn't just stop here. He knew Kate couldn't be that simple, that her stories were just a cover for something bigger. As soon as she left, he took the car and followed her. He kept his distance, trying to remain unnoticed, though his heart was beating faster. He didn't have a specific destination, but still hoped to find out where exactly she was going. Kate turned onto one of the main streets, and his suspicions started to be confirmed. She drove into the parking lot of an expensive hotel. Adam parked at a distance, watching her actions. He saw Kate get out of the car and enter the hotel lobby. There was something so confident in her behavior that Adam felt even more suspicious. He waited a few minutes before following her. Perhaps this was already too much, but he couldn't leave it to chance. He approached closer, making his way toward the entrance. And that's when he saw Kate meet the same man he had seen the night before. Adam clenched his fists as he watched Kate embrace him, her emotions unhidden, yet trying to keep it on the level of a casual meeting. She looked completely innocent, as if nothing strange was happening. But for Adam, this was already too much. He felt his heart pounding in his chest, and his face was covered with cold silence. They walked toward the elevator, and Adam decided not to wait any longer. He quickly approached the elevator, stopping it just as the doors began to close. It felt like he could hear every breath he took, every thought in his head, and all that was left to do was act. Kate and the man got off on the top floor. Adam couldn't just leave the situation unattended. He didn't have a clear goal, but he tried to figure it all out. 20 minutes later, when it was clear they had stayed in the room, Adam decided to take action. He went up to the floor where they were and, without hesitation, ripped the door off its hinges, barging into the room. What he saw shocked him to the core. Kate was sitting on the bed, this time with a smile, as if it was just a normal meeting, with no excessive worry. And the man she had embraced was completely different, but at the same time, familiar. Adam immediately recognized him. It was Josh. But not just Josh. This was Josh, the one he had seen only a few times, but now he was wearing a wig and disguise, so no one would recognize him. It was the same Josh, but altered beyond recognition. Why? Why was he trying to stay anonymous? Adam couldn't understand. All the insinuations, everything that had happened recently, suddenly became clear, but it only made everything worse. Kate and Josh didn't seem shocked or scared. They just sat there, as if it was a normal situation. But for Adam, this was like a blow that destroyed all belief in what was happening. Josh looked at him calmly and even laughed a little. "You didn't think we wouldn't find out about you, did you?" he said with irony. "You thought we wouldn't trick you?" Adam stood frozen. He couldn't believe his eyes. He stared at Kate and Josh, while his mind struggled to process what he was seeing. Time seemed to stop. Why hadn't he noticed this before? How had he been so naive? All those suspicions, all the anxiety, everything he had lived through the past few weeks, and now here he was, standing in front of them, not knowing what to do next. Kate sat on the bed, completely calm, looking at him with an expression that was hard to decipher. No pity, no apologies. She was just waiting for him to say something. Josh sat beside her, but his gaze was even more carefree. His smile was barely noticeable, but there was something in it that immediately threw Adam off balance. "Adam, didn't you suspect?" Josh asked with cold irony. "You thought it was all that simple?" Adam felt his heart pounding in his chest, but he didn't allow himself to give in to emotion. His mind was working at full speed. Everything he couldn't understand suddenly started to make sense. He looked at Kate, who now appeared even colder. "How long has this been going on?" he asked, his voice almost emotionless. "Quite a while," Kate replied, staring him directly in the eyes, as if trying to detect any weakness. "We were just waiting for you to understand what's really going on here." Adam didn't know what he was feeling. He felt betrayed, broken, and at the same time, powerless. He couldn't find the words. He simply couldn't believe that he had ended up in such a situation. Was it revenge? Or a game with his feelings? Either way, it was something more than just betrayal. Are you with him?" His voice finally broke, even though he tried to stay calm. He couldn't say it any other way. It was the question he had been asking himself this whole time, but never received an answer. Kate paused, as if she was trying to figure out how to respond. But there were no doubts in her eyes. She had already made her decision, and Adam was part of her past, not her future. "Yes," she said calmly. "And it's not just that. It's more than you think." Adam couldn't understand. He thought their story was different, that they had something special. But now everything was shattered, and he couldn't find the answers to the questions. Why had he not noticed it all this time? Why didn't she stop him? Was it all a game from the beginning? "What do you want from me?" Adam asked, trying to find some clarity in the situation. His voice was firm, but inside, he felt everything collapsing. "We don't want anything from you, Adam," Kate replied. "You were part of the game, but now everything has changed. This is no longer your place." Josh smiled. "We were just waiting for you to figure it out. Now it all makes sense." Adam felt the ground beneath him crumble. He knew he couldn't just leave it like this. He had to understand why everything had happened. He realized that maybe this wasn't just revenge for something he didn't understand. This was a story he hadn't seen. "You don't have the right to do this to me," Adam said bitterly, though he knew it no longer mattered. He needed to free himself from this, to sever any ties. But Kate just shook her head. "And you don't get to decide, Adam," she said. Her words left no room for maneuver, for explanations or forgiveness. Her choice had been made, and he was no longer part of this story. Adam felt himself sinking further into darkness with each word, feeling that everything he had was now a foreign reality. That man, that Josh, had become the key to this mystery, a mystery to which he had no access. And though his heart was breaking with pain, Adam knew that from this moment on, everything would change. He turned towards the exit, and although he knew nothing would change, he decided not to look back. He had already realized that this chapter of his life was over, and even though he didn't have all the answers, he was ready to leave them behind. Adam couldn't understand how everything had happened. The feeling of betrayal overwhelmed him, and even the thought that Kate, whom he loved, and Josh, his longtime friend, had betrayed him in this way knocked the ground out from under him. He could no longer just watch. What was he supposed to do next? How could he respond to such betrayal? At first, he tried to leave it behind, but it was impossible. Impossible when everyone around him was building their reality on lies. That day, after realizing everything wasn't as it seemed, Adam knew he couldn't leave it without consequences. He went back to Rachel. She was the only one who hadn't turned away from him after everything that had happened. She had always been there, even though she had to endure the betrayal of her husband, Josh, and even when it was painful for her to look at Adam, she was ready to support him. Rachel was sitting in the kitchen when he entered. She was staring into the distance, as if trying to understand why everything had turned out this way. But when she saw him, her expression changed. She knew he had come with a decision. "I want revenge," Adam said directly, not bothering with pleasantries. He didn't have time for games. "This isn't just betrayal. It's not just what they did to me. They betrayed you too, Rachel, and I'm going to fix that." Although Rachel understood his pain, she couldn't help but ask, "Are you sure this is what you need? You don't want to become like them." Adam looked her in the eyes, not looking away. He felt that there was no turning back. "I know it won't be easy, but they need to know I'm not who they think I am. I won't let them get away with this." Rachel sighed, stood up, and walked toward him. She could understand his desire for revenge, but she knew his soul needed something more. And although it was hard for her to agree with his plan, she decided to stand by him. She knew it wouldn't be an easy task to help Adam, but together they could do it. "All right, I'm with you. But you have to understand that we need to be careful. If we want this to work, we need more information about them. If we want this to look believable, we need to understand all their weaknesses." Adam agreed. Their plan started to take shape. Together, they decided to begin gathering information about Kate and Josh. Rachel, although a part of this betrayal, understood that for the sake of revenge, her friend had to be exposed. She couldn't stay in the shadows of this chaos, at least out of respect for Adam and herself. "We will watch, record every move they make," Adam said as they began developing their plan. They decided to act thoughtfully, not hastily. Rachel tried to find ways to get closer to Kate, keeping up the appearance of their friendship. Meanwhile, Adam kept an eye on Josh, uncovering his habits and conversations. Within a few days, Adam began noticing some interesting details. He witnessed how Josh, seemingly by accident, met with other people who, at first glance, had nothing to do with him. But in reality, these were connections that could be useful to them. Information began to accumulate, and Adam and Rachel started to see the bigger picture. Rachel also realized that Kate was hiding something. She began paying closer attention to her behavior and her attitude toward her. At times, Kate seemed nervous, as if trying to conceal something, and other times, she exhibited a forced optimism that felt insincere. Adam and Rachel didn't treat all of this as a game. They understood that their goal wasn't just revenge. It was to reveal the truth. They wanted to show Kate and Josh that they wouldn't allow them to control their lives. They began to implement the first stages of their plan. Adam set a few small traps for Josh, making him believe in something innocent. Rachel tried to get closer to Kate under the guise of offering support, raising suspicion and exposing inconsistencies in her words. They worked as a team, making their actions effective. But nothing could have prepared them for what would come next. Rachel and Adam began to notice that Kate wasn't as simple as she had first appeared. And even though they tried to act cautiously, the future promised to be far more complicated than they had imagined. This plan of revenge by Adam and Rachel was just the beginning of their game. And while it seemed simple at first glance, they had no idea how many trials they would have to go through to reach their true goal. Adam and Rachel decided to carry out their plan to the end, and it seemed like everything was going according to plan. They were observing every move of Kate and Josh, recording their meetings, finding new evidence and traps. The plan was working. Josh and Kate appeared confident in their impunity. They didn't even suspect that a couple was watching them, a couple that already intended to expose everything. But after several weeks of what initially seemed like a regular monitoring operation, the situation took a new turn. Rachel began to notice that Adam was opening up to her more and more. At first, it was small moments, when he touched her hand, when they laughed together over small details, when their gazes lingered longer than usual. He talked about his life, his fears, how hard it was for him to live with this betrayal, but more and more, he began to express other emotions. She couldn't remain indifferent to him either. Her own feelings were mixed, and while she tried to stay focused on revenge, a new dynamic was growing inside her, something she had never planned. One evening, after they had uncovered another important clue that could expose Kate and Josh's connection, they sat together in the room to discuss their next steps. The air was heavy with tension. It was here, amid plans and deliberations, that Rachel accidentally looked Adam in the eyes, and in that moment, it became clear. Something more had happened between them than just collaboration. Adam, still struggling with the pain of betrayal, was surprised by his own feelings. His desire for revenge became somewhat clouded when he realized how close he had become to Rachel. His connection with her wasn't just temporary anymore. It had become something deeper. He had opened up to her, not afraid to show weakness. Rachel, I don't know what's happening to me. All these emotions. You've always been there when I was hurting, but now I can't turn away from what I'm feeling for you, he said, his voice soft but firm. Rachel was silent for a few seconds. She couldn't express what she was feeling. All this time, she had tried to be strong for him, supporting him in all his decisions, but her own feelings for him were far more complicated than she was ready to admit. I feel the same way, she replied, her voice full of doubt and uncertainty. We shouldn't complicate things. We need to focus on what's important. But, of course, it was already too late. They had crossed that line where mere collaboration was no longer possible. What once seemed like betrayal and a plan for revenge had turned into a complicated emotional game. That same evening, as they worked on the next steps of the plan, ideas of revenge and punishment began to blur. They started working together, trusting each other more and becoming captivated by the strength of the feelings that had developed between them. They were no longer just allies in their fight against Kate and Josh. Their hearts were growing closer. But these new feelings became as much of a mystery to them as the very situation they found themselves in. When Rachel realized that Adam felt more for her than just support for the revenge plan, she found it difficult to define her feelings. Her emotions began to change as well. She felt a deep connection to Adam, but at the same time, she couldn't let go of her loyalty to Kate. All these treacherous thoughts tormented her soul. But the most interesting part was how this affected their plan for revenge. Every step they took to force Josh and Kate to openly admit their guilt no longer felt like pure revenge. They both realized that it wasn't just about paying back the betrayal. It was an opportunity for them to figure out who they were and what they wanted from life. And though their feelings were tangled and everything was becoming more complicated, they knew one thing. What they had gone through together would leave an unforgettable mark on their lives. Rachel and Adam were now a part of each other, and although they could maintain a distance, inwardly they were more connected than ever before. Confessions, emotions, and new feelings became part of this complicated process of revenge, and even if they couldn't fully understand where it would all lead, one thing was certain: they could no longer be the same as they were before. Adam and Rachel meticulously planned their revenge, using all the information they had gathered about Josh and Kate. The first stage of their plan was the public exposure of the betrayal. Adam decided to use his network in journalism and social media. He organized an anonymous post on popular websites and forums, publishing materials that confirmed Kate and Josh's affair. These posts included photos and videos of them together, as well as interviews with several people who confirmed that Kate and Josh had been secretly seeing each other for a long time. In addition, Adam reached out to an old friend working for a major newspaper and asked him to arrange the publication of an article that ominously described their story. The article was filled with vivid details that would make anyone pause, especially if it were published in the tabloid section. The posts quickly spread across the network, attracting the attention of people Kate worked with, as well as her friends. Everyone saw the photos and materials about the betrayal, and it severely impacted her reputation. As a result, even her closest acquaintances and colleagues began to avoid her, asking uncomfortable questions to which she had no concrete answers. While Kate was dealing with all the turmoil, Rachel wasn't idle. She set a little trap for Josh. Using her connections, Rachel managed to attend an important business meeting where Josh was supposed to be present. At the meeting, she made sure that everyone there learned who Josh was and that he was at the center of a public scandal. Her interviews with other event participants also included references to the article that had been published, along with links to a series of social media posts. But Adam and Rachel's revenge wasn't limited to just the public exposure. They knew that they needed to take one more step to definitively end their relationships with Josh and Kate. Adam decided to make another crucial move in their plan for revenge. He gathered all the photos, recordings, and intercepted messages between Josh and Kate and passed them to their close friends and family. The true emotions these two had been hiding were now revealed to people who had been unaware of their secret relationship. An important step in the revenge was that Adam forced Kate, and Josh to face the consequences of their actions once and for all. He arranged for them to receive simultaneous public condemnation and criticism from their social circle. This moment became the climax of their relationship, and they could no longer hide their betrayals from others. Meanwhile, Rachel, who had begun to think more deeply about her feelings toward Adam, realized that their revenge had become not only an act of retribution but also a mechanism that brought them even closer. She could no longer deny her emotions toward him. As they carried out the plan for revenge, Rachel increasingly noticed that her emotional connection with Adam was growing stronger. The shared moments when they worked together, organizing plans and gathering evidence, only deepened their closeness. In the end, when all the materials had been delivered and the public's reaction reached its peak, Kate and Josh had no chance of staying together or even saving face in front of others. Their betrayal became known to everyone, and even their closest acquaintances couldn't leave them alone. Adam and Rachel stood side by side as all this unfolded. They didn't feel satisfaction over what had happened, but they understood that they had achieved what they wanted. They proved that the truth cannot be hidden, and that actions eventually become known. However, what had happened between them could no longer remain unnoticed. Adam and Rachel's relationship had changed. Both of them began to open up to each other about their true feelings, and although their revenge had been successful, it became the turning point that started a new chapter in their lives. What do you think about revenge that is open to everyone? Is it fair when someone acts in a way that reveals all secrets? And have you ever faced a situation where revealing the truth had unexpected consequences? Share your thoughts in the comments.